Okay guys, so I'm out here on this very hot day, sweating to death. I shouldn't have come outside to do this, but we've got an interesting video today. Alright, so before getting into it, take a moment to watch this clip of Jordan Peterson. My mom sent this to me just the other day.
Number 4 is compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to who someone else is today. And the reason I wrote that was because I had this client, I'm a clinical psychologist, and I've spent 20 hours a week for 25 years listening to people tell me about their lives, you know, and those people were people who were just barely hanging on to the bottom of the world, up to people who were so successful you can hardly believe it, like the entire gamut of people. And that's been absolutely fascinating. It's like being a clinical psychologist, if you really listen, is like being immersed in a Dostoevsky novel all the time, you know, because it's amazing what people will tell you if you listen to them. People are so interesting if you actually listen to them because they're so peculiar. Like they're like penguins or rhinoceroses or ostriches. They're unlikely creatures. And anyways, with regards to comparing yourself to who you were yesterday and not to who someone else is today, this old client of mine, he was about 85 when he came to see me, and he was a financier and a kind of a mathematical genius. He made these little pendants out of a mathematical symbol for the most beautiful mathematical equation that was ever written. He made them out of gold, and he would hand those out. And he had studied psychology as a young man, and he introduced me to this concept that I didn't know about called the Pareto distribution.
Now, the second that I saw that clip, I knew immediately exactly who he must be talking about. 85 years old, Toronto-based financier, mathematical genius, going on about the Pareto principle, background in psychology, handing out little golden tokens, talisman symbols, trinkets, with Eulers Equation, the most beautiful mathematical equation as rated by mathematicians. Jordan Peterson is talking about my grandpa. That's Burke Brown, who he's talking about right there. And just to confirm this, my dad, you know, Zadie has now passed away. We say Zadie, that half the family is Jewish. So we can't ask him directly, but my dad has his computer and he checked the email record, and lo and behold, a bunch of correspondence with Peterson. So I felt that I would take the opportunity provided by this video to talk about two of the mathematical symbols that Peterson is referring to. So we've got, first of all, Burks Wave. Is that clearly in the shot? Yeah? Okay, cool. There's that, and then there's also this, the specific one that Peterson was speaking about, which is the epiphany symbol. So I'll talk about both of them, just describe what they are, and I'll describe their significance after just explaining what they are. And I'm gonna do this at like just a pretty basic level, like high school math level. I could make it understandable to everyone and do it at like elementary school level, but I think people would get really bored and the video would go on forever. Okay, so basically this one here, the epiphany, which I hope I was holding the right way when I first showed it to you guys. I might not have been. This is a combination of 6 mathematical constants. So mathematical constants, that basically just means numbers that are extremely interesting in mathematics and that show up everywhere. So this contains 1, 0, pi, I, E, and phi. So those numbers all have really interesting histories. They have extremely interesting properties. Now, I'm not a mathematician. I can't go deep on that, but suffice to say, if you were to look into it, you would be pretty astounded. So just to briefly describe what all of these numbers are. So everyone knows what 1 is. Everyone knows what 0 is. Pi, most people know that. That's the ratio of a circle's circumference to its diameter. I, that's the square root of -1. Phi, that's the golden ratio. So if you have 2 quantities and they're in the same ratio to each other as the larger of the 2 quantities is to their sum, then you are in the golden ratio. That's what phi represents. And then finally, you've got E. So E is a little bit weirder. The equation for E is the limit of the function bracket 1 plus 1 over n, end bracket, to the power of n, as n approaches infinity. So that's kind of convoluted. Basically, if you compound interest over, you go 1 year, 100% interest rate, and you look at what you get from that, you get 100% of your money back. If it's $1, then you'd end up with $2. So if you were to go to 50% but 2 compound periods, then you'd actually end up with slightly more money. If you went to 25% interest but 4 compound periods, then you'd get actually slightly more money. And it doesn't approach infinity though, as you reduce the as you increase the amount of compound, as you reduce the amount of interest infinitely and you increase the amount of compound periods infinitely, it actually approaches E, which is Euler's number. So another way to describe E that's maybe a bit more simple is that E is the base for natural, the natural base for logarithms and for exponential functions. So an easy way to explain that is that if you were to graph the function, or the exponential function y equals e to the x, then for any point on that entire exponential curve that you get there, the slope of the curve, the value of the function, and the area under the line will all be equal. So they call this, the base for logarithms and exponential functions, which are inverses of each other, because never at any point in the entire graphing of the function e to the x do you have the slope overtake the function value or the function value overtake the slope, or same thing applies to the area under the line. They always stay in a 1-to-1-to-1 ratio. So yeah, that's E. Basically, this guy Euler came around, and again, there's an interesting history behind him coming to this equation, but we won't go into it. Euler came around and he found a way to combine 5 of these things, just forget about phi for now, 5 of these constants into one equation, which is, as I said earlier, voted to be the most beautiful mathematical equation by mathematicians. And that equation is e to the I pi plus 1 equals 0. So basically what my grandpa, my zadie, did as a sort of cheeky mathematical joke, phi is the only number whose square root is itself plus 1. So you can actually sub in phi squared minus phi for 1. So what he did was he took Euler's equation. So he moved the e to the I pi over to the other side. So then you have 1 equals negative e to the I pi. Then for 1, he subbed in phi squared minus phi. So then you have phi squared minus phi equals negative e to the I pi. Then you would move phi over to the other side and move negative e to the I pi over to the other side, and then you get phi equals e to the I pi plus phi squared. Okay, yeah, so that's how my zadie worked phi into Euler's equation as a kind of mathematical joke. In fact, one time he was at a conference, I forgot what it was, something about the betterment of humanity, and there was a Nobel Prize winning mathematician there, and my zadie was a funny guy. He went and he put symbols like this, and I think he actually put that equation at one point with phi worked in onto a shirt or onto a talisman, and the Nobel Prize winning mathematician saw him wearing it and just started laughing because he immediately got the joke. So yeah, that's what the epiphany symbol is. It's all the constants from Euler's equation plus phi. And now that I've described what it is, I'll describe its significance, and then I'll do the same for Burks Wave. So the significance of this is that these numbers, they're mathematical constants. They are found naturally in the world. Even if we had an alternate system of mathematics or logic, as long as it's consistent, we're going to discover these same kind of properties in nature. Unless you're a logical relativist, but I think that would be an insane position to hold. So basically, when you're looking at these quantities, you're seeing pi. It's a fundamental aspect of how reality is structured. You're seeing phi. It's like the fibers of how our reality is constructed that you're looking at. And when you're seeing them and understanding them, it's like you're almost like groping or grasping at the fiber of reality. You're feeling connections between them, and it's as if this whole structure that makes sense of everything. You're accessing little portions of it. It's like the blind man and the elephant, actually. That's a perfect analogy to use right there. So that can be feeling that deeper, super abstract structure that underlies all of reality. That can be, if you feel it in a profound way, a spiritual experience. And my grandpa actually referred to these experiences when triggered by math as memes, with an H, not M-E-M-E, M-E-H-M-E. So meaningful, emotional, human, mathematical experience. And he felt that it was very important for kids to experience memes. He felt that becoming conditioned into mathematics at a young age is important. It becomes increasingly hard to experience memes if you haven't as a young person as you become older, and this shapes your whole way of seeing reality. And a mathematically literate public will actually have real, tangibly different opinions on things in the world. So yeah, he felt there was that kind of significance to the experience that's captured by Eulers' equation. And then there was other bits of logic behind why he would make these symbols. He felt like part of why religion spread so effectively was their use of symbols. So he wanted to create sort of parallel symbols for mathematics. So yeah, that's the epiphany, spelt with an I, so like E, pi, phi. Anyway, the other one is Burks Wave. So that's this little thing here. I hope that's well shown in the shot. I'll put an animation on screen when I talk about it. Now, this one's a little abstract. It's kind of hard to understand, but it's super interesting. So I'll describe what it is, and then I'll describe its significance. So if you picture, I'll talk about the animation, but it's a bit hard because I don't have it in my head, in front of me right now. So in the animation, here, I'll just play it. You can see it. Okay, now the animation starts out with all 500,000 agents having $10. Now, as they start exchanging cash, you can see the wave, Burks Wave, begin to form. So you move from this pillar of everyone having the same amount of money into a bell curve structure, some people getting rich, some people getting poor, most people having a medium amount of money, and then the wave gradually compresses over to the side, more and more people getting poorer and poorer, fewer and fewer people getting extremely rich, and the middle class, of course, completely bottoming out. So I can't get into the details of how it was programmed, but basically this is just agents exchanging money, either in random sums or some specific quantity, and it's just iteration after iteration. I think there's 10,000 iterations. It shows below on the entropy graph how many iterations there are. And this is every agent, you can basically picture them flipping a coin, 50-50 probability of either gaining or giving away a unit of money. Now, another thing to note here is that regardless of whether the amount of money they're giving away is random or it's a specific quantity, you still get the wave forming. It just will form more slowly if, for example, it's a constant quantity of like 1 penny or something like this. So yeah, that's the wave, and actually I'll explain a bit more why it works. You can picture after one iteration, one coin flip, you know, half the people now have, if you say you give everyone 50 cents to start with, you do a coin flip, they're giving away 1 penny at a time or gaining 1 penny at a time. After one iteration, you have, you know, 50% of the people roughly are going to have 51 cents, and then 50% are going to have 49 cents. And this is the beginning of a kind of systematic advantage that accumulates and then eventually produces the wave. So now if you think about the position of either of those two groups of people, the 49 centers or the 51 centers, the 51 centers, for them to remain at 51 cents, they could win one and lose one, they could lose one and win one. If they win two, they're up to 53 cents. But for a 49 center to catch up to where a 51 center is, he would have to have 2 wins in a row. So you can tell the 49 centers are now at a systematic disadvantage. The 51 centers centers are at a systematic advantage. And again, just the cumulative effect of that advantage over time is to eventually get the wave. All right, so I think that's enough about the wave. And the significance of this, my grandpa saw it as a fundamental aspect of economic behavior. In fact, he saw this as the core cause for inequality, and he actually, if you look at sciences like the kind of human sciences, psychology, the arts, these aren't sciences that are known for having mathematical universal laws in the same way as a science like physics is known for this. What my grandpa felt this wave was the first universal law of human economic behavior. There's a domain of science that is growing, which I've only ever heard two people in my life mention, Peterson and my zadie, called econophysics. It was actually an econophysicist, Viktor Yakovenko, who had a grad student of his program that animation. So there's a domain called econophysics which is interested in this type of stuff, like fundamental mathematical laws governing the behavior of economies. So the significance is basically that it's this core property of economic systems, and it is likely the reason for inequality, the core reason, on my grandpa's view. So there you have it. That's an explanation of the epiphany symbol, and oh wait, is that backwards? Yes, or you guys have to hold it that way. That's an explanation of the epiphany symbol and of Burks Wave. Okay, that is all for today. Jordan, the family would actually love to send you one of these rings since you mentioned zadie in a video with 1 million something views. So I'm on Twitter. If you send a direct message just with a PO box and a ring size, we will send one right out to you. Okay, that is all for today. Till next time.